Baruch shechiyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. We are entering the Tkufa of Shovavim Tavshin Pei Hey. Last year was Siyata Dishmaya. We tried every week to give over some type of thoughts and some type of hadracha from Rabbi Seinu HaKadmainim on our avodah during these days of Shovavim. And with Siyata Dishmaya, we will try that again this year with the tefillah to the Rabbi Shalom, V'hinayam Hashem Aleikeinu Aleinu, Umase Yadeinu Kainena Aleinu, Umase Yadeinu Kaineneu. Shovavim is brought down in the Paiskim, B'Shem the Arizal, and in all the earlier Svarim, their marich about the Kedushas Yemei HaShovavim. The uniqueness and the greatness of these 6 weeks from Parshas Shemos to Parshas Mishpatim, where every Yid is given the opportunity to pick himself up from the tumas of Eilam Hazeh, to be mesakein and fix the pigamim that was caused through all types of averis and inyanim and kedusha throughout the year. And these 6 weeks in particular are given to us as opportunity, days of opportunity, to be able to pick ourselves up and be mesakein. And really we find that there are 2 reasons why the Yemei HaShovavim are meyuchid for this avodah. The first reason is because these are the weeks that we learn and we learn the Parshas of Golus and Geulas Mitzrayim. Golus Mitzrayim was different than all other Goliyas. The Svarim tell us that whereas all other Goliyas, we went to Golus because of Averis that Klal Yisrael did, and therefore we needed Golus to be mesakein. Golus Mitzrayim was not due to any Averis. Avram Avinu was promised at the beginning, at the birth of Am Yisrael, Yedoya Teda Ki Ger Yezaracha Be'eretz Leilahem. And as we say in the Haggadah, Vayotzienu Mikur HaBarzel MiMitzrayim, being in Mitzrayim was a purification process. The Golus was specifically for the reason that we should be able to purify ourselves as a people and be able to be zeicha, to reach that pinnacle of Matan Torah, to stand under the mountain and hear Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeisecha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. And since these are the weeks that we learn about Golus Mitzrayim and Geulas Mitzrayim, so these are the weeks where we can, every Yid has the opportunity of purification, of purifying himself and being misaken himself, to be zeicha, to come to that reimemus of Klal Yisrael, of Kedushas Yisrael. But the Svarim tell us there's another reason why these days are unique. The Zohar tells us that the months of Teves and Shvat are quote-unquote bad months. These are the months of Esav, Chodashim Haroyim, very hard months, very hard for a person to be mashlim himself in his avodas Hashem during these months. Whereas in the months of Nisan, and then following that with a Shavuos, and then a Elul and a Tishrei, our Yomim El Yonim, our days of avodas Hashem, were on a high. The winter months don't have any Yomim Tovim Midairaisa. And even after, and once a Chanukah comes by and we finish with the Chanukah, and it comes the Asara B'Tevis, that was the start of Churban Beis HaMikdash, the next 2 months are down months. And the Svarim tell us that because these months are down months, that's why these months are mesugal for tikkun of our personal avodah. How do we understand this concept? The Tanya in Perek Chav Zayin tells us there are 2 types of mahalchim in avodas Hashem. There's an avodah called ishapcha. The avodah of ishapcha is getting rid of the bad, being mesalikit, and living in a world that's only good. And this is an avodah for tzaddikim who are zeicha to reach that madrega. But for us regular people, the avodah is iskafia. There is bad, it's in front of us, we have to deal with it, but we overcome it. And the Tanya tells us that just like we find when it comes to food, there are 2 types of sweet food. There are foods that are naturally sweet, they're good from the beginning, And then there's the spicy food, which are really bitter. But when it's done right, and it's spiced right, and we put the right things in, then we overcome that bitterness, and that itself makes it taste good. Zok the Tanya that the Avodas Hashem of regular people is not the sweet food that are naturally sweet. The Avodas Hashem of regular people is when he faces this struggle and he overcomes this struggle, and having that struggle in front of him and working on it, that is what brings him to higher madregas and Avodas Hashem. Steht in Svarim that that's why Dafka in the Chadoshim of Teves and Shvat, in these days of Shovavim, we are able to be mesakin ourselves more than the whole year. Because Adarabba, when the bad is in front of us, when it's taka harder, when we don't have that spiritual high of the months of Yomim Tovim, that's when the true strength of a Yid shines. And when we invest in these days, that's mesakin ourselves and makes us really better people. What's the first mahalach and the first necessary action that's required for Avodas Hashem, and especially in these times? The pasuk tells us, Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. The prerequisite of any madrega in Avodas Hashem is Yira, fear of the Rabbi Shalom. Unfortunately, this concept is a little taboo today. We don't like talking about the Yira. It's much more geschmack to talk about Avas Hashem, how much Hashem loves us and how much we love Him. But the real truth is that the prerequisite of everything is that realization of Yiras Hashem. And Yiras Hashem on a simple level. An Aveira has Einshim. There's repercussions for what we do. And as the Mishnah tells us, one has to be mechashiv, schar aveira keneged hefseda, and hefsed mitzvah keneged schara. One has to take into consideration that there are repercussions for our actions. That Yiras Shemayim was the first thing that we find in the Parshas of Galus Mitzrayim. The first test that we find in Mitzrayim was the test of the Miyaldos. Yocheved and Miriam were faced with a test. The king told them to kill all the children, all the Zecharim, all the baby boys, and they didn't. And the Torah tells us, how were they able to withstand this Nisayan? Vatirena ha-Miyaldos eso Elokim. Zok de Mashkiach Rabbi Yerucham. Do you know what that means? Do you know what Vatirena means? It means that they were busy thinking and making cheshbainis and realizing that even though the king tells us that we have to do it, and even though there are so many reasons that we have to listen to the king, our lives are at stake, maybe even the whole Klal Yisrael is at stake, and maybe it's worth it. But that Yiras Shemayim, that fear of doing an Aveira, that's what gave them the courage and the strength to withstand that Nisayan. The Rabbeinu Yonah in Shari Tshuva tells us, Ha'adam chayiv lahochin marchei liboi b'chol eis. A person has to think, constantly have on his mind, ulahashkin b'liboi ema v'yira me'alpnei Hashem yizbarach. A person has to be busy thinking about Yiras Shemayim. And when one thinks about Yiras Shemayim, one is zeicha, taka, to be able to have the koyach, to become bigger and to become better. Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. As we enter these days of Shovavim, let us first realize that the prerequisite of any steiging, the prerequisite of any tikkun, the prerequisite of us being to be able to be zeicha to everything that we can be zeicha to is Yiras Shemayim Pshutai Kemashmai. And if we think about it and we take time to think about Yiras Shemayim and to learn Svarim that tell us about Yiras Shemayim, whether it's Sifrei Musar, Sifrei Avodah, Sifrei Chasidus, there are so many Svarim out there in all languages which can help us develop our Yiras Shemayim. If we do that, we will be Zeicha Mirtz Hashem to use these days of Shovavim to its fullest and be Zeicha to the Tikkun, and together with Gans Klal Yisrael will be Zeicha to the Tikkun HaSholem B'mheira V'yameinu Amen.